Building on our previous discussion of creation and the natural world, we naturally arrive at a fundamental question that Aristotle himself grappled with. What exactly is this essential nature we talk about? When we define something, say a human being, as a rational animal, what makes that definition work? Is there some underlying reality, some essence that all humans share, or is it just a useful label we slap on things based on how they seem to us? This isn't just an academic puzzle, it's the very heart of the medieval problem of universals. Think of it like this: when you see a bunch of apples, you recognize them as apples. But what is that appleness that makes them all apples? Does it exist in each apple, or is it just a concept in your head? Boethius neatly framed this for the Middle Ages, contrasting Plato's view that these universal forms exist out there in a separate realm, like cosmic blueprints, with Aristotle's idea that they're found within the things themselves in the sensible world. But before Boethius really kicked things off, Augustine had already been exploring a fascinating alternative, one that would prove incredibly influential. Augustine's take was quite ingenious. He wasn't buying Plato's idea of these perfect forms floating around in some ethereal realm, nor was he entirely satisfied with Aristotle's notion that universals are just stuck inside things. Instead, Augustine proposed something radically different. What if these universal natures, the reasons, or logoi as he called them, reside in the mind of God? Imagine God, before creating anything, having perfect, unchanging ideas of everything he would create. A perfect idea of a man, a perfect idea of a horse, a perfect idea of a tree. These aren't just concepts. They're the archetypes, the divine blueprints. God then creates the actual things in the world according to these ideas. So, when you look at a man, you're seeing something that participates in, or imitates, that original divine idea. Augustine saw this as a clever way to get the best of both worlds: the intelligible, necessary structure Plato valued, but grounded in the creative power of God, rather than a separate, perhaps inaccessible realm. And crucially, this divine source of truth offered a path to knowledge beyond mere sensory experience, a kind of divine illumination, though Augustine stressed it was only accessible to those souls purified enough to perceive it. Now, Augustine's idea was brilliant, but it threw up some serious headaches. First off, if God has separate, distinct ideas for every single type of thing, a unique idea for Socrates, a unique idea for Plato, a unique idea for a specific horse, how does all that fit into the supposedly simple, unified nature of God? It's like asking how countless different songs can exist within a single, perfect instrument. Then there's the epistemology issue. If Augustine is right, and true knowledge comes from this divine illumination, what about people who aren't holy and pure? Pagans, scientists, anyone who figures things out through observation and reason alone. Doesn't this clash with Aristotle's strong emphasis on learning from experience, the tabula rasa approach? Later thinkers like Matthew of Aquasparta wrestled with this. They felt Augustine went too far by making illumination the sole source of knowledge. On the other hand, they also rejected the purely naturalist view that we build everything up from scratch without any higher guidance. Their solution? A more balanced view. We need sensory input, memory, experience, working with our own innate intellectual powers, what Aquinas later called the agent intellect. But this natural process still needs to be oriented towards, or informed by, those divine ideas, even if not through direct miraculous illumination for everyone. This brings us to Henry of Ghent, who really sharpened the critique of relying solely on our own mental constructs derived from experience. He made a crucial distinction. Knowing that something is true, e.g., this is a tree, is different from knowing the truth of it, i.e., understanding what makes it a tree in its essence. We can certainly know things are trees, but can we know the truth of being a tree just from looking at lots of trees? Henry says no. Why? Because our mental image, our exemplar of a tree formed from experience, is fundamentally flawed. First, it comes from changeable things, so it inherently carries that instability. You can't get pure truth from something inherently messy. Second, our minds themselves are fallible. How can a potentially errant mind be corrected by something just as fallible, or even more so, which is what our mental image is? It's like trying to fix a blurry photo using another blurry photo. Third, and this is really interesting, our mental image is similar to both true perceptions and false ones. Think about dreams. In a dream, you might see a perfectly normal-looking tree, but it's clearly not real. Your mental image of a tree is what allows you to mistake the dream image for reality. Since our internal exemplar can lead us astray just as easily as it can guide us, it cannot be the reliable basis for certain knowledge of truth. To truly know the truth, Henry argued, We must turn away from our own limited concepts and seek the unchangeable truth residing above the mind, those divine ideas again. So, if our own mental images are so unreliable, how do we get that certain knowledge? Henry proposed a fascinating mechanism. Illumination acts like retouching. Imagine you have a beautiful painting, but the only copy you have is a very poor, fuzzy photograph of it. Now you want to understand the painting better. You could try to improve the photo by comparing it to other fuzzy photos, maybe eventually getting a slightly clearer picture. But the real way to get clarity is to go back to the original painting. Henry suggests that when we gain genuine insight, the divine idea itself impresses itself onto our existing, albeit imperfect, concept. It's like taking that fuzzy photo and carefully retouching it, not based on the fuzzy photo itself, but by referencing the original artwork. The external thing, the tree, is already a copy of the divine idea. Our mental image is a worse copy of that copy. Illumination is the process of using the original divine idea to correct and refine our mental copy. Suddenly, our understanding becomes much sharper, allowing us to grasp the precise nature of things. Think about learning geometry. Your initial vague idea of a circle might help you spot circles, but when you finally understand the definition equidistant points, that flash of understanding, that's illumination retouching your concept, revealing the true structure you were only vaguely grasping before. Even without a full mystical vision, this kind of conceptual refinement counts as illumination. Okay, Henry's retouching model is neat, but it still relies heavily on that divine intervention. What if we wanted to avoid that dependency altogether? This led to the rise of the Aristotelian approach, often called the Via Antiqua, the old way. Thinkers like Abelard and especially Thomas Aquinas championed this. The core idea was a shift in focus. Instead of God constantly intervening to illuminate our concepts, God endowed us with the capacity for illumination. Aquinas spoke of the agent intellect, a faculty God gave us, a likeness of the uncreated light. This power, operating naturally within us, is capable of abstracting universals from sensory experience. It's like giving us the right tools and training to do the work ourselves, instead of needing constant supervision from the master craftsman. If God gave us this ability, then maybe we don't need direct divine retouching for every insight. But this shift created a whole new set of questions. If these universals are things our minds make, what exactly are they? How do they exist in our heads? How do they connect back to the individual things in the world? And how do these mental constructs allow us to communicate and share knowledge through language? The debate now shifted from metaphysics, where do universals exist, to semantics, what are they, and how do we use them? To tackle these semantic questions, the most influential thinker was Avicenna, whose ideas deeply shaped Aquinas. Avicenna introduced a crucial distinction that Aquinas elaborated beautifully. He talked about considering a universal nature in two ways. First, there's absolute consideration. Imagine the pure, unadulterated concept of horsehood, just the essence of being a horse. Aquinas says this, considered absolutely, is neither one nor many, neither existing nor non-existing. It's just horsehood itself. It doesn't have accidents like being white or belonging to Bucephalus. Second, there's modal consideration. This is when we consider the same nature as it exists in a particular individual, like Socrates. Now accidents start piling on. We can say Socrates is white because Socrates is white, even though whiteness isn't part of humanity itself. The same human nature exists in Socrates, Plato, and me, and it can be considered absolutely. But the key point is that this sameness, this shared human nature, isn't the same kind of sameness as saying, I am the same person I was yesterday. It's not numerical identity, it's a different kind of unity. Aquinas and others use the term less than numerical unity to describe this peculiar sameness. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is simple. Think about a book. You can have multiple copies of the same book, paperback, hardcover, maybe even a digital version. Each copy is distinct, has different accidental properties, page count, format, condition. But we still talk about the book as one thing. The sameness we recognize across these different copies isn't the same sameness as saying the paperback is numerically identical to the e-book. It's a weaker, more abstract kind of sameness, the sameness of the content, the information, the work itself. When we count publications, we count distinct works, not distinct copies. We achieve this by abstracting from the various physical realizations. Similarly, Aquinas argued, we talk about the sameness of humanity across individuals by abstracting from the specific accidents and individualities of each person. This sameness allows us to group things together, to count them, to form categories. But crucially, this doesn't mean there's some single Platonic universal book or universal human lurking behind all the copies or individuals. The sameness arises from our ability to abstract from the differences. But wait, there's a paradox here. Aquinas said the absolute consideration of a nature abstracts from its being in the mind. Yet, how can we even recognize it as a universal, as something common to many, if it has to be in the mind to be recognized as such? It seems like a catch-22. Aquinas navigates this by drawing a very fine line. He distinguishes between the nature itself and the act of abstraction or universality. The nature itself, the essence of humanity, only exists in individual humans out there in the world. But the fact that it's apprehended universally, without its individuating features, that act of abstraction, that universality itself, happens in the intellect. He uses a great analogy from perception. Sight perceives the color of an apple without perceiving its smell. Where is the color seen without the smell? In the apple. But the fact that it's perceived without the smell is an accidental feature of the color, arising from the nature of sight, which captures the similitude of color, but not of smell. Similarly, humanity exists only in individuals. But the fact that it's apprehended universally, stripped of individuating details, is an accidental feature of humanity itself, arising from its being perceived by the intellect, which captures the similitude of the species nature, but not the individuating principles. It's subtle, but it allows him to maintain that the universal nature exists extramentally, while the universality is a mental act. Even with Aquinas's careful distinctions, this whole framework, the Via Antiqua, became incredibly complex. Talking about the same nature existing in different places, acquiring different properties, depending on whether it's in the mind or in the world, and being considered in absolute or modal ways, it was easy to slip up and create contradictions. Imagine trying to track all the different attributes a single nature could supposedly have. To manage this complexity, later thinkers working within this tradition had to develop even more fine-grained distinctions, carefully mapping out which properties belonged to the nature itself, which belonged to its existence in the mind, and which belonged to its existence in the world. It was a sophisticated system, no doubt, but arguably a tangled one, leading many to seek a simpler path. Enter William of Ockham, the master of simplicity, and the architect of the Via Moderna, the new way. Ockham looked at the intricate machinery of the Via Antiqua and declared it fundamentally flawed. His famous razor cut right to the chase. Entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity. He saw the entire realist enterprise as creating unnecessary ontological baggage, positing all these essences, natures, and their various modes of existence just because we use certain words. His solution was radical. Throw it all out. Ockham championed nominalism. For him, universals like human tree, red exist only as names or concepts in our minds, or as sounds and marks in our language. Out there in the real world, there are only singular things, period. No common natures, no essences, no abstract forms lurking anywhere. By doing this, Ockham seemingly solved the realist problems overnight. If there are no real universals, then questions about how they subsist in particulars vanish. But as we'll see, this came at a cost. Ockham didn't just deny universals, he tried to rebuild the entire conceptual framework. He reduced the kinds of real things to just two: substances, the things, and qualities, their properties. Everything else, quantity, relation, time, place, could be analyzed using these basics. The crucial part was how we get our basic concepts. Ockham believed we form simple universal concepts, like human, directly from experience. These mental concepts are the foundation of our entire mental language, and our spoken words are just labels attached to them. And here's the kicker. Ockham claimed these mental terms naturally signify all members of the category, all humans, past, present, future, even possible ones. But how? How can a concept formed from, say, 10 humans possibly signify billions, or even hypothetical ones? Especially since, for Ockham, there's no underlying essence or nature that all these humans share. This reliance on innate, natural signification of our mental terms, bypassing the need for a real universal essence, proved problematic. It raised deep questions about how we can justify grouping things the way we do, and whether scientific knowledge built on such concepts was truly grounded in reality. So Occam's revolution, driven by his razor, successfully swept away the metaphysical complexities of realism. No more worrying about essences subsisting in things or minds. But, as often happens in philosophy, solving one problem just creates another. By denying real universals, Occam opened up a Pandora's box of epistemological questions. How do we actually form these supposedly natural concepts? What justifies our grouping things into categories like human or tree if there's no shared essence? Can we really build a robust science based on concepts that seem arbitrary from an objective standpoint? Occam's Via Moderna shifted the philosophical battleground decisively towards questions of knowledge, meaning, and language, setting the stage for much of the intellectual ferment of the early modern period. The debate between realism and nominalism, though transformed, remains a vital thread in the fabric of philosophical thought.